Okay, well, welcome everybody. I know there's a few more people planning on joining us, but we'll get started right away because our guest is already here. We're really excited to have Sara Maharajh join us today. And we're excited mostly because she grew up in co-ops. And so we're going to get to hear, what was that like? But beyond that, she's got a lot of really interesting experience. So if we want to ask her questions later related to more of her work experience, I'm sure we can do that. Sara is the president of Cliffside Court Housing Co-operative in Scarborough, Ontario. That's really a mouthful. And so in other words, not only did she grow up in co-housing, but she's still living in co-housing cooperatives and still active. So it's kind of a lifelong. And she's also, she works for the Canadian Credit Union Association in the Education and Development arm. And so that's why we're interested in credit unions. We could probably ask her some questions about that too. I didn't tell her to be prepared for that, but I'm sure she could talk about that. I also, I know, Sara, that you were named a cooperative champion, and I thought that was really cool. So congratulations on that. And thank you for being here. This is our Milwaukee area cooperatives and co-housing group. And we've got some of our regular members here and we've got some new folks here. I don't know if we should quickly go around and just say who we are since we're so small. I'm Julie Whalen-Capel and I'm on the diversity and affordability circle for MAC. Alan, you want to go next?
I'm Alan Steffen. I coordinate the Zooms and work on outreach and some of the educational programming that we do. I've been with the group for about 4 years.
George, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm George. I'm living in Paducah, Kentucky these days, but I'm helping out, getting things going in Milwaukee. Locally, something I guess to announce is I'll be working with our local planning department. They want to do some co-housing in some of the projects here. So.
Wow. Patricia, do you want to unmute and tell us about yourself?
Hello. I live in Kaukauna, which is a couple hours north of Milwaukee, but we have 2 grown children in Milwaukee, and at least one of them is our daughter, who has 2 children, is interested in living in a co-housing situation. And we're pondering a move to Milwaukee. We don't know if it's possible or, co-housing sounded like a good option as far as choosing how to live, where to live. So we're just interested in getting some ideas and some. I did read Courtney Martin's book on co-housing. I thought that was really enlightening, and just like to get to know a few people and see what's happening there. And probably we'll have questions along the way.
Wonderful. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And Nola, last but not least.
Oh yeah, I'm sort of the instigator, but I also have very active times and some less times. So yeah.
And is this Jay?
This is
joining?
Jay. I'm going to rename him.
Okay.
Oh, you're so powerful, Alan.
I'm a magic mouse.
Jay, can you hear us?
I can.
There you are. Okay.
Hi, Jay.
Hi.
Not a meeting without you, Jay.
Do you want to?
Guess what happened? You just happened to enter right exactly at the time when we're just finishing introductions, and now you'll be the last one.
All right. I'm Jay. And I have 2 kids, 23 and 8, going on 9. And been involved with MAC for a bit.
Well, thanks for being here. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Sara. Go ahead. Thanks for being with us, Sara.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I didn't even realize that article went international. I thought it was just a Canada thing. Um, so to dive right in, I was born in Trinidad. I came very young. My mother's Canadian, and we found ourselves in a community that was developed in the 70s as a mixed income community. So there was co-op housing that was as rental units. There was co-housing. There was ownership aspect. There's condos and homeowner city housing, all in the same community. And so, as the co-op that we moved into was geared towards single mothers primarily. So a lot of them originally are still there today, but it's expanded into all types of families dynamics, and some people have grandparents in there, and the children, the grandchildren are in another unit, and dynamics like that. And most of the co-ops in that region, when they were developed kind of niche for each co-op. So again, there was single mothers, there was ones that were geared like just a one-bedroom units. There's nothing like that. There were some that had an ethnic base, or a like there's an arts co-op. So people who are in the arts industries all live together and have created areas in that dynamic. And they've been ever evolving since. And the neighborhood itself just works. You know, growing up there as a kid, nobody ever worried about how much anybody made, or, you know, what anyone's family dynamic was. We all ran and ate from each other's houses and slept in each other's beds. And we just, you know, everyone, you know, kids came running and knocking on my door to introduce themselves as soon as I moved in. And it was, we, as children, we created our own kids committee and did our own movie nights and things, whatever we wanted to do, and did crafts and sold them to any really nice members who gave their pocket change for our crafts and stuff like that. But it was really nice. And it was nice because at the time, so my mother was a single mother. She was working full time, doing her MBA, and raising me. And, you know, it was one of those things with co-op housing that, you know, it's a certain safety net for people in certain dynamics, in the sense that she never had to worry that if something were to happen to her employment, or something were to happen with her schooling or anything, that she'd lose her housing, or that she wouldn't have someone there to watch me if there was a meeting late at night, or whatever the situation might be. It was true definition of community living. So everybody helped out everyone. We had this major blackout in Toronto I think it was around 2004, and the whole city just went dark, if you can imagine. And our neighborhood, all the kids knew where the people with mobility issues, our seniors, and different families lived. And we all went up into the buildings, took the stairs, made sure everyone got out, had a big street barbecue. Everyone took out their ice cream out of their freezer before it melted. And we just kind of made the best of the darkness, and made sure everyone was okay. So when I think of, you know, what I think people believe community means by the definition of the word, I don't know if they truly understand what it feels like. And I've been fortunate enough to understand what it feels like. And, you know, it's, I'm still friends to this day. You know, we call each other sisters and brothers with all the kids I grew up with. And their parents are all still my parents. And, you know, they're still the aunts and uncles to my son. So I have a 16-year-old son as well. And so for school reasons, really, I moved out of the co-op and into another area that had a school that I preferred my son went to grow up in. And it's a community that, you know, has the stereotypical perfections of a community, the parks and the all of those kinds of things. But I quickly realized it wasn't the same type of community. There wasn't that in and out bond. There wasn't that real family feel in the community. People were nice. Nobody was mean or anything like that, and kids played together and stuff like that, but it didn't have that deeper connection, that deeper level of connection. So once my son finished grade 8, I actively pursued looking for another co-op and found myself in Cliffside. And so we've been here for 2 years now, and I became the president last year. And part of the reason being is my extensive background in the system from many different angles. The dynamics here, we're working, one of the things when it comes to ownership of a place that's run by the people who live there, there's the feeling of the community is going to depend on who's sitting in the seat that's making the directions at the time. So there was some challenges that this community had before I got here that were on their way to being rectified when I got here. And so there's still some of those legacy issues that we're dealing with in terms of how people are feeling and how the communities run. And, there's some dynamics, distrust with the board and things like that, that we had to be mindful of coming into this situation. But it's a lot of optimism. Everyone loves being here. We included cable, we included parking, we included internet, we included storage. So all utilities, everything is included in the house. There are a lot of family dynamics, like the one that I explained and the one that I grew up in. So there are 3 to 4 generations of families living. The way that our co-op is, it's 8 3-story, or I guess 4-story buildings if you count the basement. And so throughout those 8 buildings, of course, you don't have to live in the same building as your daughter or your mother or whoever. You can live in a separate building, but it's all in one cul-de-sac area, so that it's really easily accessible for everyone to kind of enjoy each other. We've got different picnic areas with barbecues, and we've got a park set up for the kids. And unless you knew the co-op was here, anyone else in the city would not even realize that it was here. Like, bikes are left unlocked, and it's really a shared community. Lots of people love the gardening aspect of it, which is really nice, because I'm not good at gardening and all of that. But we have a few committees that work on different areas. And definitely, I think one of the things with Toronto right now, we're in a huge housing crisis. I don't think we've ever not been in one, to be honest, but right now it's really, really bad. And that price of a 3-bedroom house in Toronto is upwards of 1.5 million on average. So we're in kind of a dire situation in the sense that we need affordable housing, and unfortunately we're not getting them built, if at all, as much as the demand requires. So a lot of the housing co-ops have had to close their wait lists, have had to turn people away and from all demographics, from all regions. So our situation here might be a little bit of the opposite of what you guys are in terms of, I did go through and read some of the demographics from Milwaukee that was on, that was Googleable anyway. But there was a time where we did have to actively look for members, we did have to actively look for families, and we did have to actively coordinate with other organizations to try to find ways to fill those gaps. In my professional life, and which ties into my childhood growing up as well. So my co-op sponsored me to attend the Cooperative Young Leadership Camp. And so it's for teenagers to develop their leadership styles and understand cooperatives, understand what it means to be a member, what your duties are and responsibilities are as a member. And ultimately, I ended up using it on my resume to become a teller at a credit union. Worked my way, been in any role you can possibly think of in the credit union system. And now I work for the National Association in their training and development arm. So I can help with the director training and employee training for about 130 of the 230 credit unions in Canada. So the Cooperative Champion, so we have a couple different organizations and associations in Canada that speak to different areas of cooperatives. So we have the Co-ops and Mutuals Canada. I'd kind of put them at the top. They have members like the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada. And so the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada is a really good resource to talk to and also pick the brains of. They're responsible for, lobbying the government, for getting us affordable housing built, for supporting the ones that exist in many different facets that would be hard to list. But they do everything from education to, finding businesses and industries that can make the developments cheaper, or if somebody needs to do a green fix to their community or something like that. So where you found my article is where that association stands. So under Co-ops and Mutuals Canada, there's them. There's where I work, which is the Canadian Credit Union Association, where we do the same thing, but we do it for credit unions. So we do government lobbying, we do awareness, we do education, etc. And then when you break it down even further, we've got provincial associations. So for how, if you're not familiar with Canadian demographics, it would be like having an association for Wisconsin. And then, Kentucky would have its own association, etc. So the Ontario Cooperative Association focuses on supporting the cooperatives in Ontario, which is the province that I live in. And they're the ones that hosted that camp that the other credit union sponsored me to attend. They go into schools and teach the business model. They help connect co-ops with other co-op businesses. So for example, there's energy co-ops that can provide energy services to the co-ops at a discounted rate because they're both cooperative entities. There's telecom co-ops, so same thing, any telecom services you can work together to work out a deal with. Our credit union, so our housing co-op banks with a credit union, and we have something called the CHIP program. It's the Co-op Housing Something program, and it's specifically for co-op housing, where we get better rates on deposits. We get, certain types of services for free. They come in and they do financial literacy programs with our members. They'll come in and any kind of support that we need, they're kind of there. And of course, funding if we need the lines of credit or grants are sometimes available as well, depending on the credit union. But so there's lots of partnerships in co-ops themselves, more that could be developed. But and then CHF, so the Co-op Housing Federation, also has a Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto division. And because Toronto has such a high concentration of co-ops in it compared to anywhere else, certainly not as enough, but compared to anywhere else, we have our own association sub of the Co-op Housing Federation. And so sometimes what they will do is if a co-op is in bad shape, maybe it's being mismanaged, there's a lot of complaints, maybe, windows are not getting replaced or things aren't happening with the co-op, then they can step in and take over governance to help the residents get it to a state where it's sustainable, viable, etc. They come in and do mediation. They come in and do, you know, if you need a chair for a meeting, you know, you're dealing with emotions when you're dealing with co-ops, and you're dealing with people that not only, you know, just govern, but they actually live where they govern. So there's this vested, just as much as it's a positive, sometimes it's a negative, that there's this vested feeling and interest into how decisions are made and what those decisions that are made are. So when things get sticky and people don't end up getting along or can't reconcile their differences, CHFT can come in. They also do a diversity scholarship award. And I think this program is quite vital in the sustainability of the sector in Toronto specifically. So about 15 years ago, they started offering scholarships to students who are living in co-op housing. So one of our former mayors, who was a big supporter of co-op housing, introduced a scholarship in his mother's name. She was a single mother who came in as an immigrant, and so he supports that under her name every year. Some other cooperative champions that have since passed on that were in Ontario, there were some scholarships named in them. And so we've given over 100,000 scholarships since its inception, or some extreme number, whatever it is, it's an extreme number. And so I'm part of the selection committee for that, and we are about to award 30 this year to students. And what's happened is, because we've now tested it, it's been going on for 15 years, is we've seen that these students, one has become the executive director of the Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto. There's 3 that have been the board chairs of the federation. There's some that sit on the board currently of the National Federation, and they're continuing on to kind of share the knowledge and get it out there and continue on the purpose. Because what we were really worried about in terms of sustainability was, okay, we've convinced this one group of people, this one generation, and then how do we keep that going? And how do we work that? And this was kind of like a backdoor in, because if you support people when they really need it, when they're going through school, they're going to remember that. They're going to remember what the co-op did. They're going to remember. And one of the big parts of that particular scholarship is not so much academic based, although that's a part of the criteria. It's more based on what are those students doing in their communities. So are they actively volunteering in their communities? How is that promoting diversity and inclusiveness? And that's been going on. So I know it's more of a hot topic now, but we've been having those conversations for 15 years and encouraging that for 15 years now. And you would be mind blown. I am every single year to hear what these students are coming up with. And it's things like, I just don't do enough in my day job, and these guys are doing it while they're in school. But they're, you know, it's pretty incredible. So being able to tap into those groups, and even, you know, once you support them, they're willing to give you all the knowledge in the world. They're willing to support. They become very passionate. They become advocates. One of them have written a song about co-op housing and how important it is, and she's become quite a name for herself in Canada. And her name's Dominique Grant, and she was also on some of the boards. But it's a really interesting dynamic to watch everything morph and grow, and it is. It's really great to be able to tap into resources in kind of unexpected ways. So any traditional ways tend to not work when it comes to any type of co-op. Yeah, Alan, I'm sure you've learned or seen some examples, but it's even with the credit union system, like, you know, you really have to connect with people's values, connect with people's whys, to really get the, and that's what drives the type of people you want in the co-op too, right? Like, I don't want somebody here necessarily, like, you know, all caveats aside, we don't want someone here who's not going to participate or who's not going to, take care of the units, or who's, it's just not going to actively help with the sustainability, because those people do come along. And that's not to say that in certain life stages people can't have a time in their life where they can't do certain things or what have you, but it's you really want the people that want to be there for the right reason. So what's your why? Simon Sinek always says that in any talks that he gives, but start with your why. What's your why? And I think that's really important when we do the interviews for new potential members, is we always start with the why. Once we get the affordable housing part of it out of the equation, like, why do you want to be part of a community? Do you want to be able, to have those communal dinners, those movie nights, those, anything. We've done, bingo nights, or like really, you name it. I think there was a co-op that did some sessions with some Indigenous people and did some different rock painting and we have a, this is going to be so politically incorrect here, but we have a gay district, and they call themselves that, so it's not me, in Toronto, which is around Church Street, and there's a couple housing co-ops there. So there's a lot of pride events that happen in the co-ops too, depending on where they are and what their community looks like. Our community here is very eclectic. I think we have someone here from any walk of life you could possibly think of. So we do a really big, COVID aside, so when we're not in lockdown, we do a really big potluck where everyone brings something that means something to them, or a dish from their countries and stuff like that. So there's a lot of that type of stuff, and then the kids are babysitting the other people's kids, and it's just it's a really nice way to live. It's everyone, instead of living for yourself, everyone's living for everyone else, and it's really nice. And of course, that's not without its, some people don't get along sometimes, and that happens in families too. So it's just getting around those dynamics. But with that, I think I did the talking for 20 minutes, but so maybe I'll open for questions, but I'm open for whatever you guys want to talk about.
Sarah, how many members are in your co-op now, the one you're in right now?
Yeah, so we have 84 units, and we have, and they're anywhere from, so we have, most of our units are 2 bedrooms. We have 84, I think it's around 110 members within the 84 units. So there's some, nobody can become a member until they're 18. So there's lots of children, and there's some people with some guests or long-term guests, but otherwise it's about 110.
How did you find that many people to join you?
So this co-op has been here since the 60s. So it's not new. One of the things, but it's interesting because this co-op is not on the radar the way that other co-ops are. And if I didn't know about the sector, it would be a challenge to find this co-op unless it was through word of mouth from someone who lived here, or if you've passed by it or something like that. So from that, it's a lot of word of mouth for our co-op. Other co-ops are listed online in a directory that tells them when the wait lists are open and things like that. So there's thousands of people that show up to those orientations just to try to fill one unit. And where ours, we might have maybe at most 20 families come to fill up, it's sometimes like 2 units. So it's a really different dynamic. One of the things, if I think I know where you're going with this question, is where can you find people? So one of the things that I would say is, the demographics that you want to have in the community likely are and people that would connect to these values likely are somehow connected to an organization that helps them out. So for example, they could be a member of a credit union. So it's really easy to explain to a member of a credit union how a housing co-op would work, because they've already got that understanding or that baseline of co-ops in the credit union system. And what I try to scream to the top from the rooftops anywhere that I go with any co-op is partner with those other co-ops. So they can do recruiting for you when they believe in what you're doing and can see it as a benefit to their members. And you know, it's not competing because the co-op is a, you know, it's either a credit union or it's an agricultural co-op or it's a daycare co-op, which I was on the board of my son's daycare co-op as well. So you can find those people that already share those core values in some of those places. So have you looked in those places at all? Am I jumping the gun here?
Oh, Ellen, you're on mute, Ellen.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. We've done some presentations at our food co-ops in the area, and we had pretty good attendance, but we didn't get any members from them. So that was a little disappointing. We did a series of them. We did 2 presentations at each of 3 locations, and we did them, I think, 2 years in a row. And they weren't very successful. And I don't know if it was us or them or just, no, are you
Yeah.
me?
Yes.
Or if it just was not the right time. Sometimes it's just not the right time.
And I noticed, Julie, in your note, you had mentioned about trying to make it palatable for people when it comes to the down payments and working out the financing part of it. And I assume that's part of the presentation. And is that something, do you have a partnership with a credit union or a financial institution? Because it's something that I found really fascinating, and I like that. I really like that you guys thought about that, because I think one of the hardest things, especially when it comes to certain demographics, is coming up with the money for the down payment. So everyone wants to own a home, or everyone wants to be a part of something like that, but it's how do I come up with that? And I don't know what the regulations are in terms of the lending in the States or in Milwaukee, to be specific, but it would be interesting to have a dialogue with a credit union about what type of partnership can we make to get people into the place where they can afford to come into this community. Because once those types of relationships are happening, credit unions love to boast about the great things they're doing in community development. And then you have the validity of a financial institution. You know, it's more tangible when there's some validity of an kind of an established or known institution talking about it. I saw a comment there that you'd started a tenants co-op or a tenants union. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you did you mention tenants union earlier?
No, I didn't. But that's I was talking about credit unions, but that's really interesting.
Yep.
And there's a lot of people that can meet in those core values. It's interesting. I think it's a lot to do with how you tell the story, who you tell the story to, and who's backing you up. So who's adding that validity to what you're doing. And it's I can tell you, even here, awareness about co-ops. If you know, anytime someone asks me what I do for a living, the first thing I have to ask them is, do you know what a credit union is? And then I know where to start the conversation, because there's still an awareness issue about the co-op model, about the credit union system, like about co-op housing. Like there's still an awareness issue. And so it's getting over the hill of an awareness issue and then getting into the meat and potatoes of why this is so great, what you guys are doing. And there's a trust issue. So if there are people that are needing to put their entire life savings into this project, you know, where's my security? Where's my trust? Where's my, you know, how do I have that? And so that's why I always love to partner with other existing organizations to see how they can add the validity by saying, you know, we're going to partner with you to do your electrical and your lighting. We're going to partner with you to do whatever it might be. We're building the park for this community. We're doing this for this community. And it's not to say that they'll pay for it, but to just have that behind it. And I think I go back to credit unions a lot, because when it comes to cooperatives, they're one of the more well-known ones, if any. And depending on the region, if you go out west Canada, it's Co-op Central out there. It's great. But
does anybody else, this is really, I love what you're talking about, and maybe we can continue along what you're saying with partners and stuff, but I'm wondering if anybody else has questions specifically for you.
Sure.
I thought Nola looked like she was about to ask a question. Can't hear you, Nola. You have to unmute.
She is saying so much helpful stuff that I mean, I lived in a nuclear family with lots of kids, but we had, I was born in a cooperative hospital. We always had cooperative health. Everything was cooperative. So I lived in a cooperative in college, and I started a cooperative as soon as I moved to Milwaukee as a housing cooperative, because how would you live otherwise? And then we had a baby, so we started babysitting co-op. I mean, like, duh. But it is, I think what you just said was like so important, is because that was, I think what you're doing is articulating a lot of things that we have been feeling, but you have a very helpful vocabulary to articulate those things. So I've been writing down, you know, like words and phrases that really help to encapsulate and articulate what, you know, issues and so on. So one thing that is interesting is getting the way that we did the co-op that I started in the 70s was, which is still going strong, is that it was limited equity. It was just really, it's the amount that you had to pay in, which was low because we didn't want to evict existing tenants, and was you get back with a cost of living adjustment, that's it. And so it was a completely different thing. I mean, everybody's lining up to get in there. Everything was like, but now we're trying to do this really bougie thing where people like own houses and stuff like that, except for luckily Jay came along and is like, what are you guys thinking? Co-ops are better than co-housing, but it really just has to do with the demographic, you know, because people who are boomers want to sell their house and buy another house. Why? I don't know. You would necessarily want to buy a house when you're gonna, you know, you're on your way out anyway, but you know, so, but those are the people who have the money, you know, those are people who have the money. So that's why this is so interesting how you kind of started with this, because I went, you know, like in another lifetime on a trip of England, Wales, France, and Spain of worker cooperatives, on a trip that had 3 Americans, but the rest of them were crazy Canadians. So we talked about all that kind of structure, like it's so amazing, you know, the infrastructure that you have that supports a cooperative. And so when you're talking about where you can start a conversation with somebody, and you have to know whether they know the vocabulary and they get what a co-op, because then if you have to explain that whole thing, that's a whole other ordeal each time. And so that is a really good question. So the difference between the Americans and the Canadians on that trip, I'm a union lawyer. So the Canadians and all the Europeans were like, the Americans were like, how would you have a union, a trade union within a co-op, within a worker cooperative? How that's great, you know? And the Canadians and the Europeans were like, what's the question? Like, how would you not have a union within a, so like, for example, the conglomerate at Mondragon, almost brings to mind what you were saying, which is a model that we're kind of tinily walking around, which is what you said was just amazing. Like you have these co-op houses, and then you have, all the way up to co-housing with individual ownership, all the way and condominium. And then, yeah, that is very interesting model. And I think that is ultimately what we're going to have to end up doing if we do a larger project.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Nola.
I think we need diversity of models.
I'm really glad you brought that up. And Sarah, I think this is where maybe a question is for you, because at the very beginning you said, I think this was where you grew up, was this place that had these different, you had some co-op, I tried to write it down, rentals, I think you said, and then there were condos, and it was like all these different, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I do think that that's kind of what we're thinking about, is there would be some people who might want to have a condo, but we want to mix it up with a co-op.
Yeah, that was my question. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely. So Jay also put, do you make a distinction between co-op housing and co-housing? So yeah, so to answer Jay's question first, because I think yours is going to be a little bit longer. So yes, we do. So the co-op housing, it's membership run, and it's the membership's responsibility to make sure that it's maintained and it's functioned. But as you were saying, it's your benefit comes in the lower rental cost or the lower housing cost, and that's the co-op that I live in right now. That's why we have cable included, and we've paid off our mortgage 10 years ago. We've only raised the rent in $20 in 10 years, and we're able to have these services included in the rent. When it comes to co-housing, you actually have equity in the development. So when you do move out, although the return would not be anywhere near substantial to the point of had you have bought a freestanding house somewhere else, you do have that actual security of ownership. But the same governance can apply, where that's just a matter of how you're paying for the property that you live in, but the same governance model can apply. So that's kind of where I would make the distinction between the co-op housing and the co-housing. When it comes to speaking with our governments also, they tend to be more interested in talking about affordable housing. So there's two, I think, major pillars to co-op housing. One is it's affordable housing, and two, it's community development. And we seem to only be able to get funding when we talk about it as an affordable housing practice, rather than talking about it as a community building initiative. And that's one of the problems when people are learning about co-ops, because then they're equating it to kind of substandard city financed living, which is completely not the case. So I'm going off a little bit from the question, but I thought it was important to talk about that piece, because when you're, especially Alan, when you're making the messaging, I think it's really important to focus that it's not just affordable housing, it's community development. And although we need to talk about affordable housing because that's where the money comes from, and that's what people, the catchwords that people will pay for to support from a government level, it's really all about the community building. To go back to the question, so about the community that I grew up in. So there is a lot of research out there, and there is a lot of documentation on this community. It's been studied quite a bit, because it is the one and only community in North America that is of its kind. And it was done as a project to see if it would work. Let's just try it out. And it actually works, but it's never been duplicated anywhere, ever. Which just blows my mind. And it's interesting because one of our major news networks just started talking about the story yesterday and how it's kind of mind-boggling that it's never been done again. But essentially, you know, so there was the different variations of co-op buildings. So there was buildings with units anywhere from bachelors to 3 bedrooms. There's townhouses that were, some of them were part of a co-op and some of them people could buy themselves. There are condo buildings and there are like city housing buildings, but you wouldn't be able to tell the difference of which one's which, who, like, unless you really cared, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And what's really cool about the way that the neighborhood is designed, if you were to look at it from an aerial view, right down the middle for the entire, the street is called the Esplanade, but right down the entire street, which goes on for about 10 blocks or so, maybe more than that, something like that, it's all parks. So whether it's, you know, a playground park or just a green space or whatever it is, it's all parks right down the middle. There's baseball diamonds, all of that. And then there's a street, and then there's a whole bunch of housing on one side, and then there's a street, and there's a little bit of housing, and then like mom and pop shops on the other side. It's getting a little bit more, what's the word? It's getting a little bit more commercial now with different condos and stuff coming in behind it, but that's like the layout of how it was designed, which was just so brilliant in my mind, because it just, everyone has green space to play in. And you, downtown Toronto, like when you think about New York or something like that, it's so condensed. So to have that, it was almost like our own little bubble of a community that is right in the downtown core. You could walk to the major attractions, but it was its own like small town feel. And everybody was respectful of dogs, kids, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So to go back to the housing part. So again, that the project was developed by a couple people, but David Crombie was the name of one of the main developers. Julie, I think I shared that video with you that was done. So that video was created, there's a group that came together called Jammy, and it means community in Swahili, I think. And it's all the kids in the community and a couple of adults and artists and things like that come and do different art shows in the park, and they do different photography things and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, they did that video. So there's a little bit, it touches on a little bit in the beginning of that video about the history of the neighborhood, but there is a lot of articles and research and stuff done on it and available. But essentially, I think there's at least 6 different co-ops, like rental co-op buildings in the area. And like I said, mixed in with home ownership models throughout it. And I think there's 2 or 3 city housing buildings. And for the longest time, it was just 1 condo, or 2 condos rather. But again, none of the kids could tell, none of the parents gave a crap. Like, it was nothing, you know, it was, everyone just lived together. And we had 2 schools, there are 2 schools, and a community center. And sorry, a theater as well, like a small artsy theater, which we love. So that video was actually debuted at that theater. It was beautiful.
I just
Yeah.
put in the chat that we're gonna put a link. This recording will be on our website, so if anybody wants to rewatch it. And there were some people who wanted to be here but couldn't make it. And I'll put the link to the video that Sarah was talking about in the notes for that, on our website, so people can see that video.
I'll see if I can dig up some more stuff for you too, because a lot of the knowledge about that development sits with CHF and CHFT, so the Co-op Housing Federation and Co-op Housing Federation of Toronto. But I'll see if I can dig up some more stuff for you.
We would love that.
Yeah.
And I'm a co-op lawyer, so the more like terrible, you know, legal type jargon, I love that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we've got a few minutes to go. Before we all, I hate it when at the end of these things, everybody just leaves. I wanted to quick say, Patricia, I don't know if you're on our email list, but if you want to be, if you could put your email in the chat, then I'll make sure I just add you and you'll get emails about, you know, upcoming things that we're working on. And anybody else have questions for Sara?
Just thank you for all of, great information, good motivation for us to, keep slugging away, trying to get this thing off the ground. But it's good to hear that yours has been so successful, and hopefully we can shadow that here in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'm thinking, Sara, maybe the last words that you can kind of could do for us would be like a little, I mean, I'm not going to lift it and use it, but sort of like, what would be the PSA? Like, what's the message for, maybe I'm a single mom in Milwaukee and, why should I consider living in a co-op rather than just living in some apartment building, like with my kid? What are the benefits that I'm going to get? Well, you kind of list them for me, and I think it's really helpful for us to hear you say that stuff.
It's a really good question, and so I wasn't preempted with the question, so I'm going to do my best to do it justice here with the answer. So the first thing that I care about, so I'm a single mother myself as well, so the first thing that I care about is safety. So like I said, nobody would know that my community exists. Everyone's watching out for my kid. I'm watching out for everyone else's child. Nobody's going hungry. Nobody's, has to worry about losing their housing. So safety, not having to worry about safety is just an incredible weight to not have to bear. Affordability. So one income, you gotta make it stretch. And, there are so many different sharing programs that we do depending on the needs of the members here. So whether it be clothing or food or whatever it might be, art projects, every kid in our place gets a Christmas gift. So if you can't afford one, your kid's gonna get one anyway. Or whatever holiday comes around. And so, again, I would say that, again, everyone can give you a definition of what a community is, but very few people will be able to articulate what it feels like. So to be able to get to experience what being part of a community feels like is a very, again, I'm very fortunate to have had that. I think in a lot of countries outside of the Americas, so including Canada, there are strong senses of communities. So if it's someone that is coming in from outside of a traditional Western setting, co-ops are the closest thing that I have found to date that speak to the models of just genuine community development that are done naturally in other countries. So if you're homesick, you can find a community within a co-op that will help you, and as long as everyone's doing it for the right reasons. So not sure if I have more I can add to that.
No, that was super helpful. That was wonderful. And I think added to some of the other things you said earlier, where you just talked about, like how your mom didn't have to worry if she had to work late or I guess had homework or whatever. And she always knew there was someone who could, you could play with or be with for a little while if she needed that. And just being able to walk
3 little ones on top of me.
walk out the door and play with kids any time of the day, right? And like you said, just, it was almost like you had I think you said you had like a bunch of different parents, a bunch of different grandparents. You could just, hang out in anybody's house. So you've really given us some really good ways to talk about. I love how you kept saying it. How do you, the feeling of living in community. I think that's what we have to communicate. And along with all the places that you talked about partnering with, super helpful. That's what I got out of it. So I really thank you. Anybody else have anything else they want to ask?
In about like say 6 months or so, would you come back again? Because maybe we'll try to do some of these things and we can check in, and because that would really be helpful, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, not a problem at all. If I'm not on vacation, because I'm planning as soon as they open the borders, I'm going somewhere. But yeah,
especially after COVID, but even always, yes.
But yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, this has been really great, Sara, and I have to really thank Sara, because I was like, I just appeared out of, the social media. I forget how I just like said, you don't know me, but would you come and talk to our group? And she just immediately said yes. And so it was great, really helpful.
Oh yeah, no, it's been my pleasure. Yeah, you guys are a great group, and again, I can tell you're doing it for the right reason. So I'm more than happy to share whatever knowledge I have or experience, and I'm truly rooting for the success of this project, because I just think the world should be full of co-ops.
And if it doesn't work for us, you'll just help us all get visas to Canada, right?
Yeah, we'll get you all on the waiting list.
All right, thank you
I was
very
thinking
much.
of buying into yours, but okay. No,
Yeah, well,
I can't
if you
make
want to
promises.
come, if you want to come, or send people our way.
Definitely. Well, it's so nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank
Patricia, wait,
you.
let me grab Patricia's email before we lose the chat. Wait. Don't stop it yet. I'm grabbing it. Okay, wait, I have to put it somewhere so I don't lose it. Don't close it, Alan. Wait a minute. Let's see. I just want to make sure I don't lose